Hello everybody, good morning and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne, and disembodied hands, Quindy, Justin, and even John. How are you all today? I want more than a half cup of tea more, but unfortunately, it is not to be had. Good morning, good morning. A full pot of coffee every day. No. I must resist. I hate depending on it. Hate depending on the caffeine. My caffeine in the morning is actually very tame. It's a blend of green and black tea, so it's pretty low caffeine actually. I allow myself to have something stronger in the afternoon because that's when my time of day is. Internet is down? This internet? Oh no. I see it. Darn it. Hold on. Let me run a speed test, see how bad it's going to be. Why, Comcast? Why? Like, why? Just, it comes and it goes. It definitely does not like our Santa Clara server either. All right, download is not pathetic. What is with it? Maybe I need to tell David to complain. Oh no, well. Oh, come on. Yeah, it's not like cancel the scream terrible, guys, but it's not awesome either. It's not where I like to see it. I'm just going to type. Alrighty. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely on my end. I don't know what the heck, because we had stability for so long during the holidays, and now it's like tanking. So, alright, well, we'll just go forward. We can't do anything except move forward. That is the thing. No matter what happens, we are moving forward as long as we are in this world. So, here we are with Angelica, and let us do some eyeballs and some... I wonder if I still have my dark blues that I dug out. I kind of want to use something unusual, and I don't know if I kept them out. Yeah, let's use Storm Chaser. The only way to go with Necromancer Purple, I mean, if you want it to be more sinister, highlight it with red, like, Fire Red, 9004 Balthorn. Do a half and half mix. Then it's gonna go purple to red on the highlights, and that'll be a more sinister. Otherwise, the way to highlight is magenta and white, just like with any purple. But that's going to give you more of a magenta highlight, which isn't necessarily as evil, but it depends. If you're only keeping your highlights small, then it'll be just fine. But if you want to breathe evil, then you probably want to go more bloody. You can do it. Let me look at Necromancer Purple. The problem with Necromancer is that it is... There it is. Yeah, you can highlight that with red. I don't know if I have Fire Red sitting here. Yeah, I do. So you'll want to do a 50-50 mix. And you may need to do a little more Necromancer and then a little less Fire, but just bring it up to Fire. That would be what I do. What I would do. Yeah, I know, right, Dogfather? Yeah, I think it's just Comcast being a jerk. I'm going to pop her hat off today so we can see the eyeballs. Seeing the eyeballs. It's important to see the eyeballs. So I'm using a dark blue. I'm going to give her blue eyes. Maybe I'll put a little bit of aqua in them. I have not decided. yet, but we'll do Storm Chaser Blue. If you have the old Worn Navy, that's close to this, or the old, yeah, Worn Navy's probably closest, actually. Let me get in focus. There we go. Yeah, so everybody's internet is lousy, is that what I'm hearing? I have no idea how internet, like, as far as the networks and how they're constructed and what affects them. I have no idea how that works, so it is not my thing. So eye color tends to be muted and not super bright, so that's why I'm starting with Storm Chaser instead of something like Ritterlick. Though it probably won't matter at the end because you're only going to keep this dark blue around the edges of the eyes. Yeah, maybe everybody did log into work today. Everybody's home with the plague. There's plenty of colds going around in addition to the standard plague, so alrighty. Bad today all over. Bad internet. No cookie. I'm going to do just a little bit more of this. Probably do about a 3-to-1. We'll see. I need it to be dark, but I don't want it to be like super thick. So as you guys recall, we did not use actual pure white to do the whites of the eyes. We used something like Weathered Stone. I mixed it from walnut and white, which gives you a color that's very close to Weathered Stone 9087. But Weathered Stone is a great color to use. If you're going to highlight it up from there, you usually want to use more of a yellowish white. That's kind of the color of our eyes. But I wouldn't go up to pure white on anything this large, because it's just going to look cartoony. And we're already in danger, because of the sculpt, we're already in danger of looking somewhat cartoony. Sure, Shadow Raven, what's up? You can always ask questions totally unrelated to this figure. That is always a thing. Alright, so I want to kind of look at this and figure out where I want her looking. She is turning her head to that side. So let's do that. I'm going to come up from underneath. I'm going to use the eyelid to stop the brush. I'm just going to mark 2 marks to show where I want her looking. And she won't be looking up, but I want the marks to kind of line up from the beginning, and then as I widen them and make them go further down in the eye, it'll all come through in line. So you have a textured pattern. I would have done it before I did white, or I would put a wash down over the white to pick up the texture, and then I would carefully go over it again with white. It is, whenever you paint white, it's going to be punishing. It's not an easy color to do, especially on large surfaces. But I would do a wash of something that's fairly lightweight, like Snow Shadow. You don't want to do a dark wash over white ever, or you'll never get it. Like, it'll take forever to work it back up. But if you have sculpted texture that you're trying to emulate, the first thing you need to do is bring out that texture so you can see it better, and leave it probably in the shadows a bit, and then take white and go over all of it to bring it back up where the wash dirtied the upper surface. But remember that you don't need to bring a surface up to pure white for it to read as white, depending on the other colors on the model. With big stuff. Caveat, with big stuff. Because if everything else on the model is fairly much darker than that white, you can bring it up just to an off-white and you'd be fine. It'll still read as white. And it also depends on what the surface is, Shadow Raven. If it's a shiny surface, then you do want to bring it up to pure white, but probably only in the top highlights. Now, the larger you make the iris and pupil combo, the softer her expression is going to be. The smaller you make them, the more watchful and alert she's going to look. So don't give her really big irises and pupils if you want her to be like, you know, alert. It's had problems, Kroniko, since the beginning, so just do a refresh. We're Comcast and apparently every other internet provider is annoyed today. No, I mean, you're, I don't have the time for, like, unless, if you're on the Patreon, there's a place for that. In the Discord is, feedback wanted. But otherwise, frankly, I would love to, but I really don't have the time to give a lot of feedback individually, because I get asked a lot, and it takes a lot of time to write those emails and to do that sort of thing. So, I mean, what I can do is what I just did, is to give you a basic idea that if you've got sculpted texture and it's a white object, either base coat with the shadow color and then bring it up with white, or paint it white if it is already white primed, then just do a wash over it and then bring it up. And then the questions that you need to ask are, what is this surface? Is it shiny? Is it shiny is your key question. If it's leather, it could be shiny or not shiny. And that's a decision you make. It's not one that, you know, anyone else makes for you. Is you decide how you want to portray it. If it is shiny, it goes up to pure white. Otherwise, it doesn't need to. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, put it in that I make time for that channel. So, put it in feedback wanted. And my data check and respond there is usually Thursdays. But yeah, if you really, really run into it, remember my patrons also get the opportunity to engage me for coaching. So if you wanted to, you could. But you can also, if you want a quick feedback, just toss it in that channel and you're good. All right, so I've widened out the eyes. I've left a fair amount of white, and that's the thing. Is like these are fairly large eyes, and so you have a lot of room here to make the iris pupil combo as big as you want, while still leaving enough white that she looks alert. Now this eye's a little bit further over, so I'm going to adjust it. Part of that is just a sculpt. You'll often find it, especially, not always, I mean, this is a digital sculpt, but you'll find it especially in stuff that's manually sculpted. You'll sometimes see one eye is maybe a little bulgier than the other, a little more round. And it throws you, because when you try to do the iris combo on it, it looks different, or it kind of distorts the look. So I'm going to just gently edge that a little bit more over. Oh, it's cloth. Okay. And if it's not shiny cloth, then you're good. Yes, I do what I can. I do what I can. I feel like I need another 4 hours in the day. Actually, even 2 hours would help immeasurably. All right, so I am getting a little bit, I need to touch that up. So I better mix up my eye color. When you're doing this, do mix up the color of your whites. So I'm gonna do it quick and grab my, I don't think I have weathered stone down there, so. You could also do wolf gray with a touch of white. I usually just pick a brownish gray is, I guess, the key here, the key takeaway for you. Oh, okay. Yep, that's cool. Yeah, that does bring up an important distinction before you seek coaching from a painter. I mean, I can give coaching at a lower level, but you probably will get you'll get more out of it if you're farther along sometimes. Unless you're really like a very good painter already, then it maybe values you to start coaching on a project earlier on. It's an interesting thing how coaching works. It's really, it's been a learning process for me. All right, so walnut is about a 1 to 2 walnut to pure white here, giving me just a kind of a brownish light gray there. It's quite pale, but it's definitely not white. So that's what we're looking at. I might even want it a little darker, to be honest. That's even a little bit lighter than I would normally go. Oh, I couldn't do that, Kerniko. Man. Like, I am one of those people who needs more sleep. David drew my attention to this. He can function very happily on like 7 hours, but I need 8. Or I'm just not as functional of an Anne. One tip. Wow. It's my same 3 starter tips, plus the or 2 of the starter tips. Very good brush, thin your paint, and the big one is go up from underneath. Let the eyelids stop the tip of your brush. That's probably the one thing. Yes. Exactly. Yeah, coaching is more for when you're trying to, if you've got like big trouble with your painting style where you just feel like you're hitting a wall, a coaching one-off on a project can be very useful. If you are a intermediate to advanced painter who's trying to really come up to the next step, maybe working on some competition entries, then coaching can be very beneficial to you. Also, if you're a prolific painter and you're just looking to level up overall and you paint a lot, and so you have a lot of models that you can present to somebody for coaching that can help you all around, that also makes coaching very useful. So I just used a bit of my white there to clean up the inside corner of that. Now I have to compare them, though, and make sure that my she's looking in the same direction. And I want to make sure that my irises are also the same shape. So I'm going to actually bring in the top of that one a little, make it more round. And this one I need to bring over a bit. Yeah, and a lot of time, Crows, you've nailed it. Like, because, you know, you can, and I was just actually listening to a writing book that said this exact same thing. You can listen to all the seminars, you can read all the stuff, you can, you know, watch videos, but eventually you have to do the work. And if you don't do the work, you're not gonna learn. There's no magical way to get by without doing the work. You must paint to get better at painting. Because even if a great video gives you an understanding of maybe where you could do something slightly differently, when you try it, then there will be other things that come up that you might need to learn or focus on first. So it's all, trying to apply is always a necessary part of the process. All right, so I'm just pretty much using a real fine touch to shape these irises a bit to make sure they're both round, make sure they're kind of in line, make sure she's looking the right way. Her eyes look weird right now because she doesn't have pupils or highlights or anything. I'm going to just round out this a little bit. And I'm going to need to fix that because I got a bit wobbly on that line. But yeah, this is, I mean, eyes are one of the most important things on a bust, so be ready to spend some time on them. Yeah, meds totally will impact that, Shadow Raven, that's for sure. Yeah, I had a friend who had a catechin jungle raiders army for 40k to surf, and all of his catechins looked terrified. As they should be. They're Imperial Guardsmen in a world of Tyranids. They should all look terrified. So I told him it was appropriate. But yeah, if you have the pinpoint dots, eyes will look terrified if you don't connect them to the top of the eyelid, which is why I say that my top tip is to actually like bring your brush in and make it intersect with the eyelid to drop that initial drop down. Then work on like shaping the eye if you have room on a 28. Do as much as you can. All right, let's get some walnut and put in a pupil. Although actually no, I should put in the blue for the lighter blue first. So let's see. What do I want to do? Surf aqua. Yeah, surf aqua with a little bit of this blue in it. Yes, I feel that there are certain places, such as Imperial Guardsmen for 40k, where being terrified, everybody being terrified, is absolutely appropriate. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my Storm Chaser blue, and I'm going to put some Surf Aqua in it. I'm probably going to do a ratio of about 1 to 3 there. More aqua by far than the Storm Chaser. Because I want to make the aqua a little less bright. I want to make it a little more muted. Eye colors tend to be blue-gray. They're seldom a really bright blue, and even the brightest natural human eye is muted. Like it's not nearly as bright as if you looked at a bright blue on a piece of paper. So, no, definitely not heroic, but oh, I love Tyranids. They're one of my favorites. I had an over 120 gaunt Tyranid armor at one point, Tyranid army. But then I moved and I was like, you know, I'm not going to play this, and here, have it to somebody else. All right, so there's white in Surf Aqua, as it is a lighter paint, so you know it has white in it. And so I've thinned it down a bit. Here are my colors. I'm going to see, that's quite thin, as you can see, but I want to build it up a little bit over this blue. So, because there's usually not a hard line around the outside of an eye. It's actually quite, let me see here what I got. There, all right. Yeah, I don't know. Let me check mine. Yeah, it seems like my OBS is giving me notifications like every 2 minutes. And it's getting worse over the last 15 minutes. So hold on. I'm just going to check it. And maybe I'll try to change server. Oh, my download is actually much better. Yeah, my upload is not doing well right now. Whenever it drops below 10, I'm just like, yeah, it's definitely on my end, no doubt. It's not general. Yeah, it is definitely me. I'm gonna see what I get on a different server and work it that way. Meanwhile, let's fill in the eye with some lighter color. This will help our pupil show up as well. Now, if you want this color to be brighter, lay down white first. Oh yeah, that's terrible. No, it's on my end, Shadow Raven. Trust me. Trust me here. I'm sitting here watching my internet tank. But we're gonna try this anyway. Because I like getting paid. But if it does become really, really unwatchable, we'll shut it down. So I'm just, and I'm kind of doing a little, as you can see, I'm not filling in the part where I'm going to be putting in a pupil. I'm going to keep it blue. Are we starting to lag out? Yeah. Yeah, my upload is hovering between 13 and 15. And usually we're getting about 35, so that gives you an idea of where we're at, guys. So if you feel it's unwatchable, Quindy, you let me know. Because then we shouldn't be putting it out there. And I should wait, and we should call off the rest of the stream. Or maybe just do questions, because everybody can hear me. And I could totally answer questions. Yeah. Yeah, except you'd also want to cloud out the rims then, I think. You'd want that cloudiness over the whole surface of the eye. I would paint the eye normally if I was doing cataracts, and then I would take a pale gray and bring it in to create a mottled effect. Yeah. All right. Well, guys, I will... I'm going to get this blue solidified at least while we talk. But then, yeah, if you guys have any mini painting questions, now is the time. Let's at least do some questions. And if my internet comes back, let me know. I'm going to just put another layer of blue in here to see if I can get the color a little stronger. And I'm also kind of stippling at this point because remember the eyes have, you know, striations in them. A lot of them do. So with busts, you can suggest that. And with larger busts, you can directly paint it depending on your brush control. When you get down to doing busts, you're going to run in again and again to the question of brush control. Your brush control is going to determine how fine and how detailed you can get your textures. So... Weird, Julie. I just like to keep checking it. But yeah, so when you're doing bigger models in general, it's going to come down to brush control. Getting the effects, like you can get a good basic effect on a 28mm model with decent brush control. But the better your brush control is when you're working on bigger models, the finer texture you're going to be able to do, you know, the tighter everything is going to look. Oh, my internet is it's looking a little better right now. We'll see. Come on, Comcast, rally. I do not get on the forums ever, Pendrake. I do not have the time. So yeah, it's pretty much, I used to have a couple people who would just, message me and tell me if there was a discussion that I could weigh in on. But these days, even if I knew, I might not have time because the half hour I would spend typing up a response to anything on the forums is the half hour I could be using to, you know, work on my Patreon or get my next video mapped out for YouTube. So, social media, I am learning, like, I don't let it distract me much anymore. I really don't have time to just read the forums. If I'm going to be putting out good content, then my time has to go to that. If you paraphrase it though, I'll answer it here. Oh, her skin tone colors. Where did I put my card? I had my card. Did I eat it? I think we were using tan skin and Griffin Golden Brown, but I appear to have dropped or eaten my... Oh, there it is. There we are. Yeah, it is. It's one of the fast palette colors. Hold on. So we start with a 2-to-1 of tan skin and Griffin Golden Brown. And then I added 2 drops of Oxide Red. And that's it's a 4-to-2 is really what I did up there. And then I added some Oxide Red. You can see how it shifts it more red and ruddy. So if you have a very weathered skin tone, that's a good idea. No, the paint numbers are SKUs, straight up. So it's just an SKU, like the SKU number will tell you what line it's in. But other than that, it's just whatever number it fell into. The earlier numbers in both of Bones and Core are generally in a better order because when I was designing, I would design the first 54 or 56 colors. And so all those will be like in rainbow order usually, followed by skin tones and browns and neutrals and metallics. But other than that, after that, when Ed just wanted new colors, they would just get the next section of colors, the next section of numbers assigned to them. Sagebrush says I'm still watchable. Is there a way to shift a color more warm instead of being muted? So more saturated instead of muted, War Shadow? Because warmer is different from more saturated. Warmer means toward red or yellow. More saturated means brighter. So which question, tell me which question you want answered. Saturated. Clears. Pure pigment colors. So if you are dealing with a red like Blood Red, but you want it more saturated, or Urgathoa Red, or Asmodeus, you would drop a drop of clear red in it. It is also going to lighten it, but it is going to increase its saturation because it's dumping even more red pigment into it. Same with any of the other ones. Now, sometimes you may need to also add a touch of white to not totally distort your color. If you're working with a light blue and you want it more saturated and you drop a drop of clear blue and a drop of maybe a little tiny bit of clear green into it, it's going to darken it because that pigment naturally is darker. So you may also need to add a touch of white. Let's see here. Let's see here. I'm trying to make sure. But yeah, Pendrake, if you want to tell me the question from the forums, I'm glad to give an answer here. And if you want to paraphrase me and respond, you're welcome to. Let's see here. What MSP white would be the best to dry brush a Zenith Prime? Oh, I don't know. I would not go for a glossy white. I just use pure white. When I go back over my Zenith Primes to sketch, like this guy, I actually have a Zenith Primed miniature here, and her, actually. So if I was going to go back over her, I would use pure white. And let's just do that a little bit. I don't get the glossy white because you're going to be putting paint over it anyway, and that's going to cut the gloss, and paint is going to have a harder time adhering to a glossy coat. So that's a weird one for me, Crows. I don't know why people would do that. They probably have a rationalization for it, but for me it seems kind of counterproductive. Because gloss paint doesn't have tooth, that's what makes it glossy. So if you're going to try to put paint over the top of that, it's actually going to have a harder time sticking to it, which means it's going to be prone to rub off or just repelling, depending on how thick the paint is. Stuff like that. So I would just use pure white. Helps to avoid chalkiness. I don't get chalkiness. I never get chalkiness with pure white. Maybe it's the paint they're using. I hate to say this, but you know pure white is supernatural, right? But yeah, chalkiness? Oh, but except that they're dry brushing, aren't they? And so if they're dry brushing, they're gonna get chalkiness. I see what they're doing. So essentially, yeah, So they're removing the, okay. So they would be better off just using a paint with a finer, matting agent maybe. So what they may be getting at is, if you're dry brushing, you're automatically going to get that kind of scratchy texture, right? But if you remove things from it that can be fine particulates, then you'll get less of that. And one of the things that shows up, probably the thing that usually shows up in a matte paint as a particulate is not pigment, but it's the matting agent. So essentially, if you take the matting agent out of the equation, you do get smoother dry brushing. But you have to use a glossy white. So that makes complete sense. But if they moved to a paint line that had less or a different matting agent, they would be able to avoid that problem. Oh, geez. Yeah, I mean... Wow. Yeah, I wonder if I've done... all that stuff is on my Patreon. I don't want to throw a paywall at him. But definitely, like, obviously, you guys, really bright red is going to be clear red. That's the brightest red we have. And can't live without reds. You can tell them Asmodeus for sure. Asmodeus and Heraldic. Those are probably my can't live without reds. Otherwise, I think this is something a lot of these other people could probably answer. I mean, I hope people are telling him that liners can be used for, you know, putting a starting underpaint over bones, for example, priming bones and things like that. But yeah, see, this is where, that's the kind of question, this is kind of where I don't go on the forums, because what I'll end up doing is I'll end up spending half an hour or even more writing a response to people like that on stuff I've already answered on this stream and on my Patreon. So at that point, I have to be like, arg, I should be creating stuff I should be answering those questions here because it's a great forum for it and we want people to come here and ask questions. So if we're going to do that. So Twisted Oma, it's here. Oh, you want to watch me apply it? It's, it's just pretty much base coating and then putting in some of the blush color here, which is Heraldic Red plus our initial tan skin plus a little bit of rich leather. So I keep the thing. But yeah, so yeah, you can tell him, Heraldic Red, Asmodeus Red. I don't consider an Urgathoa can't live without red because I don't reach for it all the time, but I do reach for those others if I need reds. So you can give him that. Hopefully other people can answer his questions on liners. And the other thing you can tell him is that not so much starter triads, but the Reaper starter set, the 11 color one, was created by me as, here are a bunch of like really solid colors to start your collection with. Some of those are core colors, and he could totally get a triad by picking up the triad that goes with them. Thank you, Quindy. You are thinning too much, green oaks. If you're getting that kind of separation on the paint, you've broken it. And you've thinned it too much. The most you should ever thin a highlight is 1 drop of paint plus 2.5 drops of water. So essentially that works out to 2 drops of paint to 5 drops of water. And that is only for pure white only. Everything else gets less water. So if you are going more than twice water, and most of the time you don't even need that. So 1 drop of paint to 2 drops of water, absolute most for most colors. And usually you want even less. Does that make sense? And do you remember what your ratio was that you were using? Quindy, you're such a goddess. How awesome are you? But yeah, when you get that ringing effect, we used to call it ringing, coffee stains, dry lake, people have all sorts of names for it. that happens because you've put so much water in the paint that you've broken the bonds that hold the paint together. So the solids gravitate toward the outside, and the inside is like almost all water. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, go look at, if you haven't watched it, Green Oaks, go watch the Thinning MSP Paint class that I did for ReaperCon. It's free. It's on Reaper's YouTube. It's free forever. And it will totally talk about how much to thin things for various applications. I did that class because I wanted something out there on the internet that would answer that question. Oh, yeah. That's way too much for whatever color you were using, unless you're using pure white. Asmodeus and Heraldic. Heraldic is my straight go-to red. But yeah, the other thing I think to say about that dry brushing white for Zenith thing is that I just don't dry brush. I mean, I guess you could dry brush Zenith and it would be faster. But if you're gonna, like, if I'm gonna do Zenith, if I've got a black model that I want to do Zenith on, I'm gonna just start sketching. I'm gonna start doing sketch style on it. So I'm gonna start just roughing in with pure white. And this pure white is way too strong, by the way. This is a 2-to-1, and I probably need it to be more 1-to-1 to do a sketch and build up. So if I do a sketch at 2-to-1, I can see all my brush strokes and I get no blend, which is okay if you're doing sketch style. If you want to suggest your brush strokes very strongly underneath what you're doing. But on her, we're not going to necessarily do that. Or if I do it, I want to do specific patterns and textures. So if I'm just blocking in light, a little stronger, because often your prime won't be very strong over the black. Quindy always has a link. Yeah, there you go, Green Oaks. There's the Thinning MSP Paint. Go and watch it. If you've already watched it, but it's been a while and you're still having issues, watch it again, because believe it or not, even though when you watch a video like this, and then you go and you practice, and you improve, but you're still having trouble, if you go back and watch it, you're going to pick up on even more things that you forgot, because your brain is going to watch that, but it's immediately going to forget like at least half of it. And in a couple hours, it's going to have forgotten like 70% of it. So essentially, going back to watch stuff like that has a huge amount of value for you. And it also helps anchor the ideas into your brain. When I'm listening to audiobooks on my walks, I will re-listen to them. I give that a break, I go listen to something else, but then I go back and re-listen to the whole thing. Because there's going to be something in there that I've, more than one something usually, that I've totally forgotten in that time, that it would be valuable to me now. So yeah, if I'm going to do Zenith, I'm just going to pretty much do thinned white and just mark it down, do sketch. A little bit of scribble never hurts. I'd rather do that than build up the dry brush texture. But that's just me. The best thing to do, Eric, is to look at actual asphalt and try to figure out, like... Because asphalt's the black stuff, right? Am I right on that? So if we're just taking some white... I always do this. When I have a Zenith model, I will then take pure white and go back over it. Often I'll smooth it out. Like if I get the speckles and I'm annoyed at the speckles and I don't want them... especially if I'm going to be working with thinned paints, I'll often grab some black and some white, and I'll just go over the Zenith and create, you know, more of a, yeah, like a road surface. I thought asphalt was the black stuff. Well, we used to call blacktop in Wisconsin when I was growing up. To this day, the smell of asphalt will take me back to like working summers at Six Flags, because everything was asphalt at that time. And the smell of it was in the summer was just so pervasive. The first thing to do is to look at, yeah, it does. It can go grayish and brownish and almost rusty looking. So the first thing to do is to honestly look at pictures of it. Look at cracked asphalt. Do some things like cracked asphalt, and that'll give you older asphalt, and you know, new asphalt, and look at pictures online, you're probably going to be going with an off black. I probably personally would use carbon gray, but I would add a bit of either like brown or maybe oxide brown and oxide red to it if you have the Kickstarter colors. So like carbon gray with a touch of that and a touch of that. I mean, just a little bit of a brushful. Because especially if it's under warm light. Yeah, asphalt is brown, right? Exactly. So I would use that off black, and I would add reddish or brownish colors to it. Processed cork sheets make great asphalt. That's a good tip, Kerniko. Thank you. Yeah, if you want new asphalt, then you probably want to use black with a carbon gray dry brush, or you use carbon gray and you put a wash over it. Yeah. So that's more. See, our chat knows more about asphalt than you ever wanted to know. So yeah, if I'm underpainting, I will often take pure white and just reinforce areas. Also, when you're doing stuff like this, like you sometimes get a little highlight, but you know there should be a stronger one. It's just your primer can and the angle you put it at. So like for a ridge like this, I'll bring in a much stronger highlight. I'll reinforce it with pure white. But I just don't, yeah, I never do zenith with dry brush. I don't know why you would when you have spray primers and airbrushes and all sorts of ways to do it. Especially because dry brushing, like, unless you're very good at it, you're going to get white where you don't want it. But I suppose it is the poor man's way. If you don't want to use sprays, also, it's a way to do it. So, yeah, whatever works for you. But yeah, I bet they're using glossy ones because whatever paint they're using has a discernible texture flattening agent, and that's coming out when they dry brush with it. Because if they're noticing that it goes away because they're using a gloss, then almost certainly the white they're using to dry brush has a matting agent that becomes visible upon dry brush. Yeah, carbon gray is a great faded t-shirt black is what we called it. And I made that color so that it would be light enough to take a black wash and look like you highlighted black. Like, so that's what carbon gray is actually meant for, is if you're painting Black Templars or something, and you paint it all carbon gray and you put a black wash over it, it'll look like you actually have black that you highlighted once, and then you just have to add another highlight and it's done. It's the super speedy black technique. I had 40K gamers test this, by the way. Yeah, right, Kerniko. Yours is always black because we get no sunshine. Oh, dear. Yeah, I mean, the thing with black, I mean, asphalt not being truly black, but you want to leave a lot of black. That's what most people do when they're doing black and they run into trouble, is they make it too gray. They bring up too many highlights. If you want something to look black, you have to leave it largely black. At least half of it. And preferably even more of it if it's really a deep black, especially if it's shiny. Shininess always changes everything on surface highlights. All right, so I mixed up a color with Surf Aqua with just a tiny bit of white in it. I'm going to try to do a little bottom highlight in her eyes. Oh no, Kerniko. That's too bad. They did not properly shore up their path. But I suppose flooding will take away a lot of stuff, even if you do try to prepare. So I'm going to do, eyes are kind of like gemstones. You'll normally see a highlight toward the bottom. And that does, look how much more life that does, that picks up, as opposed to the flat blue. So gemstones normally have light kind of gather in the bottom. And that's exactly the way you want to do eyes. You put your brightest highlight at the bottom of the iris. And then you put a bit of a shadow up more toward the top of the eye. Metallic undercoat isn't really going to look like a gemstone. It's going to look like a colored metal. Gemstones are translucent and light passes through them more shadow. And because of that, that's why the bottom of a gemstone is usually where light catches. I just did a example of this. 1 second. Let me get my coaching example. Remember how I said I use these artist trading cards to do all sorts of things and then I'm saving them? I actually got my binder sheets the other day for them. Gemstone. Very simple gemstone. The light is mostly falling on the flat of the blade here, of the surface here. And the bottom of the gemstone are lighter. You get light gathering at the bottom. And the reason is that the light is hitting up here, it's gathering here and bouncing toward your eye, but it's passing through the stone and it's gathering down here. It's hitting this bottom edge, and that's where you see it kind of like catch. So that's not at all how metallic paint works. Metallic paint is going to give you a reflection up here, wherever the light is falling from in your natural environment. So it's not really going to look like a gemstone. It is a quick, cheap, and dirty way to try to suggest that something is a gemstone. And a more opaque gemstone that is not transparent could certainly be suggested by metallic. But sorry, catching up in chat. But yeah, so eyeballs are like gemstones. So you put your highest highlight toward the bottom of the iris. And then I'm going to bring in some of this dark blue, the Storm Chaser blue, literally using the correct color for this model. Is Storm Chaser blue a ReaperCon color, Quinty? Do you remember? Was it a ReaperCon special? So now I want to grab a little bit of this Storm Chaser, thin it way down, and I'm going to bring it in to darken the top here. Just paint in some layers. Yeah. And make this a little bit darker up here. Now let's get our walnut and do a pupil. I kind of left a little suggestion of where the pupil would be when I did the iris, as you can see, and that will now help me, just kind of as a little pointer to where I want my pupil to be. Now remember also that pupils aren't usually like perfectly round. Like there's a little bit of intrusion of the iris into the pupil, and the edge seems to be a bit blurred in often, depending on the individual. So when you have a bust, sometimes you want to suggest that a little bit. You put in a pretty sharp pupil, but then you take your blue and kind of fuzz the outside edge of it if you want a very realistic looking eye. Oh, it's in the High Seas Adventure Fest palette. That's awesome. That's good, because it was one of the things I featured in one of my pen tabs for the PDF this month on Patreon. Speaking of, I have a Patreon. We've mentioned it a couple times. I don't know if Quinty linked to it. If she did, then it's patreon.com/paintingbig. And yes, I have lots of stuff on there. I have answered many questions. It's over 3 years of content at this point, so it's a lot. Especially at the higher levels, because then you get all the lower level content as well. again, the great thing about the Patreon is I'm still learning things as a painter. So it still allows me to like if I go back and I do a thing on bust eyes, I'll probably be able to give even more information and examples because I've improved the way I do eyes over the years. So now I'm going to grab a little bit of this walnut. I've thinned it about 2 to 1. I want it to be thin. And I'm going to bring in a sharper dot here. Now her pupil on this side is actually going to be pretty large because remember this side of her face is in shadow. And I can suggest that. How's the connection, by the way, guys? Are you able to follow me again? Am I visible? Am I watchable? Have we cleared up? Yeah, Drow Nipple Pink is a great base shadow, or a base, base shadow skin tone for Vampire's War Shadow. But then I would bring it up with very different colors. I wouldn't keep it pinkish purple. Just because it's not my jam on vampires. I like to highlight greens with pinks and pinks with green to do vampires because I like it to look more neutral. Hello, Cajun. So nobody answered. Are we still dropping frames? Is it still terrible? I haven't looked in a while. So thinning your walnut also has the advantage of not making it terribly sharp when you do these sort of things. Oh noes. Yeah, the internet's is unhappy. I'm sorry, everybody. Yeah, I think I'll stop. I was just kind of painting. Maybe I'll just keep doing my sketching. It's terrible. Internet is terrible. A little bit, but okay to watch. Okay. It makes a fantastic highlight for purple, Eric. If you're dealing with something like, if you're using something like runic purple, mix BCA pink into it to build highlights. It's a great highlight for purples. So at the very least, you can just use it to highlight purples. You can also use it to highlight reds, especially colder reds. Same thing. I see. Yeah, sorry about the internets today, guys. Hopefully it will eventually get better. I'm just going to stop checking it at this point. It's just telling me that it's tanking. Not enough brush. Sorry, cat. Sorry. We do our best. We do our best with what we're given. I have disappointed the cat. Now I feel sad. I'm also going to bring in a bit of shadow on the edge here of her cheek. See that lighter area that I missed earlier? Just going to bring the shadow in there. Cut that out. There we go. Now it's sharp. Alrighty, let's see. Any other questions? Yeah, BCA pink is a great highlight for those things. BCA pink it's not really a good blush color. If you need a pale pink lipstick, it'd be good. But yeah, what I find it's good is for highlighting purples. It's just lovely for that. So yeah, maybe this stream is terrible enough that it really can't go up on the intertubes. They do it for certain months of the year, but if they make too much, Eric, then it goes out in other orders afterwards until we're out of it. I think I got a little bit too far on that pupil, so I need to bring it back a little. But yeah, we do a lot of gallons, like at least 15 to 20 gallons of BCA pink during the month of October, easily, because it has to go out with every order. And we get a crap ton of orders in October because of the ghoulie bags. So that means like a lot of gallons, thousands and thousands and thousands of bottles of BCA pink. Better than no snow, yeah. No snow where I am. At least in Texas, it snowed like once a year or usually. Yeah, if they've produced a ton of it, then you'll get it through January. Like, that's rare, I think, but... Yeah, that's true. Warn them that it's not great, but that we are answering questions. Which brings up the fact that I'm out of questions. Oh, the ghoulie bags are for specific, for October, for Halloween, Cage of Beauty, and usually they're only for a limited time. But you just have to make an order that's over a certain amount of dollars, and you get one free with your order. So during October, then we do ghoulie bags, and then we do the Christmas bags for December. We don't do it necessarily for the whole month. We tend to run out, so... But we do give out the breast cancer awareness pink for as long as we have it. Free miniature and candy. And free paint. Like holiday paint, Cajun. So a special edition holiday paint that you otherwise don't usually get. Sometimes we do a holiday paint set that has one or two of those colors, but it's not always offered. David is a city boy. I am not. He pointed out to me that we are officially suburbanites now. He seems okay with it because he can still walk to a bakery. So I still have a little bit of an off-center pupil here. I'm going to try to mess with it. Just bring in a little bit more color at the top of the eye. There we go. That's better. Much better. That's a good look. We like that. All right. Now this eye is still too light. So I'm considering doing a shadow over the whole thing. Now some realistic. You can see that it casts a realistic shadow. The hat does. So I could just bank on that and keep it the way it is. Or I could try to take it down a level. Because obviously when the hat is off, the eyes are the same color. And really they shouldn't be, but I'll leave it for now. Lining on a bust. Good question. So, if you have a cartoony bust, obviously lining is fine. Most of the time, when I am doing a bust, I only use lining in very small areas. So for her, I'm leaving more of a natural shadow. I'm not doing a line, although I'm doing a very thin line here. So the answer is I only do a line on a bust, Shadow Raven, when I've got a light area next to a light area and I need to suggest that real fine cast shadow. And even then, like, I'll probably glaze over that and darken it just a little bit. Or, sorry, lighten it a little bit. So it's not as obviously a line. So I tend to avoid overt lining on busts and I go for organic shading instead. So I'll put a shadow next to it, like down here. This is a natural shadow that's just been left and blended in. Did that at least come through? Thanks, Kraniko. That's the model I've been working on my individual stream on Saturdays. And Noli's a good example too, although she's a little more cartoony. So I actually let myself keep some of the lining from the Zenith. You can see it here and there. So Noli is maybe a little more lining worthy. Like I left it too dark of a shadow back here. I have to fix it. But Noli has, and even her though, I've tried to go more with an organic shadow, like not just lining, but leaving some of the shadow in the shadow areas. But I am doing more of a cartoony take on her shading, so it varies. But as you can see, there's little overt lining here. Like there's a little bit here, but this is more keeping just a dark green. That sort of thing. Ah. Yeah. But now this model is a little bit more cartoony in its sculpting style. Probably still not going to go with a lot of overt lining. If you remember, the lining I did have, I softened a bit on the eyes, for example. I'm sorry, Grumble. I shut off my speed test because I just didn't want to know. Are we unwatchable, Quindy? We're almost to the end of the stream and we can cap it. So on this model, because her details are bigger and thicker and she's a little more cartoony, I might do some lining because she's a little more a little less of a naturalistic sculpt. That would also be true on something like the Scar bust or the other busts from Privateer Press, which are very, very big and bulky and very cartoony. Right. And that's it. That's really it, Shadow Raven. That's where you come up against the necessity with small models of doing extra shadows and highlights because they're so tiny. But when you get something this big, it casts its own shadows naturally. And so all you need really is a shadow there, and you don't need a line. A line is less applicable. Sometimes lines are applicable. Like if I leave a tiny line here on the inside, I'm going to bring up the hair a bit, but if I leave a little bit of a line in here where the hair is near the face, that's going to be fine. Like if you look, I'm trying to think about it, like fingers. Lining fingers, even at large scale, is perfectly permissible, and you should do it because you can see those dark lines between my fingers. So maybe you don't make them as dark and as stark, just like Ms. Bust here, where I've got that line on her forehead. Maybe you put the line down dark, but then you put some lighter glazes over it to knock it back. Like maybe you do that treatment on a bigger bust, but you still can line. You just don't line quite, you don't leave it as dark. That's good, Twistedoma. Ah, okay. So anybody with less robust internet than you, Quindy, is not going to have a good time. That's what I'm hearing? Hold on, I've got to... There. Wow, this is looking really orange all of a sudden. Come here, palette. Help me. Help me readjust. Oh, no. Also, never put paint that's white in the corner of your palette that you grab to move your palette because you won't see it because your palette is white, and then you'll dip your finger in it like I did. There. Top tip of the day. Yeah, my color's all skewed for some reason. I know, I need an orange paint. Maybe I need a yellow paint. Come on, adjust back. My camera's like, okay, there we go. Whew. Everything was looking way too orange on my camera. I was like, wait a minute. Please adjust. It likes those blue eyes. It wants to focus. Not good, but not awful. All right. Thanks, Shadow Raven. All right. Well, then, if we're here, I may as well do that white highlight then. But I may need to thicken up my white because my white is very watery. All right. Chat's always happy. They can just chat. So let's do a white highlight in the eye. because the white highlight really brings in the life to the eye. And I'm going to do a 2-to-1 with pure white on this because I want this spot to be bright. It figures that we'd have crappy internet for like one of the most like involved and interesting parts of the bust. So I expect to get lots of questions in future streams. Good, Shadow Raven, excellent. Shadow Raven, you can also choose to not line, but to just use shadows, darker shadows, on like 54 millimeter and 75 millimeter if you want a more naturalistic effect. If you want a model to look like maybe you're painting a historical or just a model that you'd like to get a more natural paint job on, like some of the Limbo models are sculpted pretty nicely that way. You can dispense with lining entirely and just make sure your shading is sufficiently dark and your contrast, like your light dark contrast as far as your color choices, works, and then you'll be fine. Yeah, well, that's good. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for not abandoning me. Yep, white dot. Usually it's over the iris and pupil, Bill. So it's the catch light, as they call it. So I will usually put it, since my light on this model is falling kind of like this, it'll probably go up here in the corner over the iris and the pupil. I'm going to get it on my brush. Got to unload the brush so that we can get a nice sharp point on it. There. I like to go over a bit of the pupil as well because it shows up. There. And often you want it actually to be more of a dash than a dot. So that really brings the eye to life. All of these little things. Remember how zombie-faced she looked when we first started these eyes, and now look at them. Now this side is a little bit more tricky, and I'm probably only going to put a little bit of a highlight at the bottom of the eye because reflected light. Because we've got the hat there, and it's not going to allow light. Now, if you were just painting her with a bandana, which I've seen people do, if you're painting her like this, you would absolutely mimic that catch light in the other eye. But because we're going to have this hat here, it doesn't make sense. So I'm not going to do it. Because I can rationalize keeping the eye the same color just because the cast shadow here is going to cover it for me. But if I put a bright highlight in the upper corner of the eye, that's directly contradicting the cast shadow from the hat. So I won't do it. Yes, that's correct, Bill. And you should, like, the eye is rounded, remember? And so what I see when I see really realistic eyes done is I don't see just a single pinpoint dot. I see more of kind of a wider dash coming onto the eye. Sometimes you'll see 2 dots, depending. Like, anime eyes do that a lot. And if you have multiple light sources, then that's definitely a thing. But if you've got an overhead oblique light source, it's not necessarily going to be a tiny little pinpoint dot, depending on the source. Yeah, we do that for building washes, Eric, but I don't do it for, like, layering. Unfortunately, my brush-on sealer went into the other room because I was using it last night. Because I finished a model. Aww. Yeah, I get to buy one soon. I'm gonna, this whole thing, guys, with the, oh, my color balance shifted again. 1 second while I get it back. This whole thing with the whole I have to finish 2 models in order to buy a new one, this is working. Like, this is a good thing. There, we got our color balance corrected again. Now we're back to normal color. I hated how it's doing that. But then when you zoom really in, it tends to run that way. So for washes, Eric, I do a mixture of essentially a medium and water. So they're telling you to use glazing medium. I tend to use matte medium or brush on sealer. Reaper brush on sealer is what I almost always use because it essentially works as a matte medium. Plus it seals your model. Awesome. But I'd never add that stuff to my paint to do regular highlighting. I don't find it necessary because at any regular highlighting level, even the most high coverage paint we have, pure white, it will hold together if thinned to a layering transparency. And that's what we were talking about earlier, where it's 5 drops of water to 2 drops of paint for pure white to get it to a good layering consistency. You shouldn't ever have to thin it beyond that to get smooth layering. So any application you're doing beyond that is probably a wash or a glaze. In which case then, yeah, it makes sense to use medium if you need to. I don't for glazes. I don't find it necessary. But for washes, I do, because you want that to hold together and you're making it puddle. A glaze, you're not leaving puddles, so you actually don't have to worry about paint breakage as long as your layer that you're leaving on there is super thin and even. It'll dry evenly because it's got no imbalance of more fluid here or less fluid there. It's when you have a puddle of fluid that it has time to settle out and break like that. That's funny, Kornika. Where's Anne instead of where's Waldo? But yeah, so I guess it's what you're doing. If you're just trying to get smooth layering, if you're trying to learn smooth layering, you don't need to. You don't need to use a medium, and it'll change the consistency of the paint to do so. If you like that consistency, great. But the thing that I keep thinking is if you use medium to kind of pull your paint together while you're using water to try to pull your paint apart, it may actually give you more brush strokes when you're layering and not less. So something to keep in mind. Whereas if you're trying to layer and just using water, that's how MSP is really supposed to work. Water and sometimes a little extra flow improver if you want, but medium's generally not necessary. And now if you're not using MSP, then all bets are off. And I could see how working with a heavy-bodied paint, you might want some glazing medium because you're going to have to throw so much more water at that paint to get it to the level where you need it. I remember trying to thin pure white Vallejo for layering, and it was a pain in the tuchus because it took so much water to do it, and then it was constantly falling out of solution. So, yeah. Thanks, Tabletop Test Drive. We had kind of a crappy internet day, sadly, but I did get these eyes done, more or less, for now anyway. And she, with her hat on, she's got her eyeballs. So yeah, she's coming along. We have a lot more work to do. You can see, all of you, hopefully, that when I'm working on a bust, I work a lot slower because there's a lot more detail to take care of. You can't just gloss over it, or you can, but if you really want to do work on a bust, you're going to be focusing on very fine detail. You're going to be taking your time, making sure, thinking about the light, thinking about, the surface that you're painting. So, ooh, Trey Manor on Crow's Nest. That's awesome. Then you need to, first of all, tabletop, like eyeballs at 28 millimeter, much simpler than what I did today. So you don't feel like you have to go back and watch the VOD. I do have I think a free video on painting 28 millimeter eyes on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/paintingbig. And I feel it. And what I did is I painted part of a faceless horror. I painted part of a model with tons of eyes on it to get much better at eyes. And that's what I recommend for everybody. It's essentially the gibbering mouther of Reaper miniatures. It's got tons of eyes on it. It is Astral. It's unfortunately not in print right now. I really hope that people lobby to bring it back in. It was released at ReaperCon as a special bust for the swag bag, but then when they sold out, we haven't seen any more. I'm using it. Usually I try not to use out of print stuff for this stream, but in this case, it's a Reaper bust that I actually have. I had 2 copies of it, so I decided to talk about bust painting in general. And we are releasing 3 new busts for Bones 5. So when those come out, all of the techniques and things I talk about on here apply to those busts. So essentially this is my chance to kind of talk about bust painting in general, and you can take what I teach here and apply it to the other busts, or any other bust on the planet for that matter. Yeah. Tell Ed we need to reprint the Angelica Fairweather bust from ReaperCon 2021. That hordes of people wish to buy it. Yeah, it was a resin. And resin is hard, I know. It's a basic eyes tutorial, Eric. The one on the Patreon. Like, it's free, it's public. It's actually in the public space. It's not, you don't actually have to pay for it. It's, yeah, every once in a while I put up a free thing, because I like people to be able to see kind of what I do. It's an older video, I'll warn you that. It doesn't have, I don't have quite my setup that I do here, but hopefully it'll still be good. I should do a new one, because I have better equipment now. Yeah, all right. It is about time. I escaped again. I'm sorry, Twisted Oma. The ether is attacking us today. So yeah, what we did today, we did eyeballs. Let's just call it a little early. I think I went a little late yesterday anyway. So remember, Trey Manor on Crow's Nest this afternoon. Hopefully their internet is better than mine. But I had fun doing bust stuff and answering questions for you guys. Thanks for hanging around and making it a fun stream despite our internet issues. And I will hope that tomorrow the internet is a little less annoying. So tomorrow is Darius the Blue, and we've been working on a whole bunch of things with Darius. I haven't decided what we're working on for Darius. We'll figure it out when we get there. Probably cloth. So yes, I love you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, Crow's Nest this afternoon with Trey, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.